My name is Franz-Albrecht Oettingen-Spielberg, and I've dedicated my life to understanding and hunting Europe's most magnificent game species. Join me as I share my passion and field experience in the management and pursuit of my favorite five, where conservation, ethical hunting, and sustainable management guide every decision we make. We're inside the forest now. It's 11:15 a.m. and we're just gonna find a tree to stand behind and call. We don't know any bucks here, but the biotope looks great with lots of young trees, lots of cover. We're in proximity of the field, so there must be bucks here. The ground a little bit so that if the buck comes from different directions, you can easily step without looking and not make noise. Now we found this tree. It has some low-hanging branches, which gives us a little bit more cover. And in this particular area, I'm expecting the buck to come from any direction, really. We found an elevated position. Winds are beginning to swirl a little bit like they often do when it's around noon. So this elevated position will hopefully help us that if the buck comes from any direction lower from lower ground, that he won't immediately wind us because the wind will go above him. But yeah, it's quite exciting. I'm gonna go down to 3.5 times magnification, the lowest I can. We'll just start calling quietly because there's so much cover here. The buck could be close, so I'll start calling quietly and then get more aggressive as we go along. I quite like when there's high winds like this because there's a decent amount of noise in the forest. So most of the noise that we make by entering the stand is subdued, but at the same time, it's not windy where we are right now, because that makes the roe deer nervous and they become sort of more sketchy and itchy. They're very unaware of danger because they can't really use their senses because the wind is too loud. But right now, it's actually pretty perfect. That I love so much about the roe deer run is that you can really hunt all day, and it makes sense to hunt all day. I mean, you can be out at 12 noon and it can be just as successful as 6 a.m. And I think it's fantastic. It's very rare with other species that at 12 noon you have the same amount of activity. so exciting to call behind trees because the bucks come so close. And he was at maybe 10 meters, 15 meters when he first came up on the ridge and surprised us. Thank God our wind was this direction. He was wary. And then he went below us and came back up one more time. But he was about to go. But this is just a row rut. Like I said, it's nearly noon. And they're in full rut action. He's an older buck. Amazing. Just amazing. I love it. Gets me every time. Every time. After so many years, it still gets me every time. Looking at him age-wise, he looks like the territorial buck. So maybe it's best to move maybe 300-400 meters further down and try calling again from there. But I love calling behind trees. It's just double the experience compared to calling from high seats because you're on ground level. And of course it's more difficult as well, calling, judging, and then shooting from behind the tree because there's only so much movement you can do before the buck sees you, and it's all such close distance. I think we'll go and have a look at the buck.
In terms of scopes, I have the same scope on both barrels, which is the 3.5 to 28 times 50 PZ8I from Swarovski. I really like these because I can take them down to 3.5 times. So when I'm calling bucks, for example, with a 6.5, even at 20 meters, it gives me enough field of view to make a great shot. But at the same time, if I'm out in the fields, if there's a stag at longer distances, or even if I want to judge something, I can go all the way up to 28, which works a treat. I have an illuminated reticle. I usually put on one of these just to make sure that my rifle, when I'm aiming, is absolutely balanced and I don't have a slight left or right lean to it, which can change the bullet. It's not going to make a big of a difference at 100 meters, but it makes a difference at long distances. And then, of course, I have my ballistic turret, which I can move all the way up to, depending on how far I've shot it on the range. So this gives me the biggest flexibility on all the type of hunting that I need to do. And with the shiring mount, these are an incredibly accurate piece of equipment.
Very nice forest buck. Old buck. Really old buck. I'll show you the teeth in a moment. And it's interesting. His coronets are still very much horizontal on the head, and the pedicles are still quite high, which usually is the signs for a younger buck. But genetically, they're so different that every buck, as I said, looks different. But by the way he was acting and the way he looked, he seemed more than mature to me. And we were right, luckily. Now, like I said, I don't really like cutting the cheek of the buck, especially this early after shooting the buck. But I just want to show how old the buck really is by the wear of his teeth. And therefore I'm going to do it. So you can see by the wear all the way from the front to the back, the buck is, I would say, 6 years old. Might be a year older even, but no less than 6, at least by the wear of the teeth. It's getting colder, closer to September. I can feel the rut coming on. First few stags have been roaring. Beautiful evening. So, the stag that we're looking for, most likely, there's 2 little fields in the middle of the forest where he's been going on and off in the last few days. Now we're gonna go and sit in one part. Hopefully he'll come out there. That's where I'm hoping for him to be. If he doesn't come on that, maybe he'll come on the other one. But we can't see both at the same time, so I've got to choose one of the 2. And I'm choosing the one where we have better wind. It's a fantastic stag. We've known him for many years. And this year is the right time to take him. For sure.
I think it's important to have older stags or old stags in the population. They also help to regulate the roar. Older stags are able to manage the hinds that are in heat in a smaller time period or shorter time period than if there was only young stags around. If you only have young stags around, they might miss a hind, or they might miss another one over here, and then what happens is that the hinds become on heat again, maybe a month or 2 later. So that then means during the winter, when the stags and the hinds should really be preparing for the winter, gaining weight and adding an additional layer of fat to get through the winter and then restart the next season well, they are still rutting and they are fighting with each other, and because not all the hinds have been impregnated during the rut or during the roar. So that's another reason why it's very important to have old stags. They regulate the roar, they give birth to big calves, and they manage the herd in a way that the calves are being born in the shortest possible time span. Thereby meaning that the hinds become on heat again in the same time, more or less. And if you don't have enough old stags to take care of them in that time, and there's, let's say, young stags around but not enough of them, so you don't have the right proportions between female and male in the population, you will create an after roar that happens maybe in November. That's also when a lot of stags get killed, because some of them don't know that the roar is still going on and another one might be aggressive. And I mean, in September or October, they're all aware that they have to be careful of anyone around them, because then it's really fights to the death. But if maybe 1 or 2 hinds become on heat again in November, and 2 or 3 stags are aware of that, but some others aren't, there's often, that's where big problems happen.
As you can see, this field has lots of dips and valleys. So I'm gonna try and find the most elevated position that I can. Just sit on the ground because I'm expecting the stag to come out from the other side. Wind is perfect in our face.
So this is what the stag looked like last year. These are his 2 cast antlers from last year. And it's more or less what he looks like this year, although his right-hand side, his coronet side and his bay tine are also slightly abnormal. But yeah, this is what we're looking for. And this is the stag. He's called Die Keule. And Die Keule is because when he was 1 year old and his left side broke off, or it was hanging down, it looked like, eine Keule. A Keule is like, it's something that you hit somebody else over the head with. So that's why his name since then has been Die Keule.
Now you see those big old pine trees down there? That's where I'm expecting him to come out. He's been out the last few nights, either here or on this other field, and he's begun to roar a little bit, so it's right at the beginning of the roar, of the rut. So maybe we'll be able to hear him before he comes, or if he's on the other field, we might be able to hear him too. But I've got relatively good cover here, and I can see most of the field. So if he comes out in good light, we have a very good chance here. It's getting cold. It's getting darker. I'm still hopeful. It just feels, it's such a cold evening with little wind. It's a perfect evening for the beginning of the roar, the beginning of the rut. I don't know how many times sitting here, I'm sure you can relate how many times I've pictured him coming out of those pine trees and how the situation would play out and so on. Hundreds of times in the last, 2 hours. It's just always when you think you have something figured out with red deer, they completely surprise you and do the strangest things. And most of the time they just disappear. I still think we have a really good chance that he... Did you hear that? That's good. That was a roar. No. He's on the other meadow. He's on the other meadow. We have to be super quiet. Super quiet while we get the ground's relatively dry. Super quiet. We have to stalk through a little forest, then we get to the meadow. I'm 95% sure that I heard a stag roar there. The only one that we've seen there the last few days is the one that we're looking for. I mean, not seen, but with cameras, and one other person has spotted him, so I think the Chance is super high, that's him.